The student newspaper at Northwestern University issuing a lengthy apology to students for covering a campus visit from former Attorney General Jeff Sessions. Now, the editors of the paper apologizing specifically for photos of the event and more aboard the protests that actually identified students from the photos, saying students found the pictures to be, quote, re-traumatizing and invasive, end quote. The photos subsequently were taken down from the paper's website for analysis. We are joined now by Eduardo Neret. He is digital reporter for Campus Reform. So, Eduardo, what does all this say about the way Northwestern is defining journalism?
Well, the Northwestern student paper apologizing for even covering Attorney General Sessions' speech is really disturbing, and it shows how journalism has changed in our country. The paper also added and apologized for contributing to the harm that students felt by Attorney General Sessions' presence, and the fact that students would be harmed by a former public official's presence on campus is also really disturbing. But this is what happens on campuses when you put feelings over facts. Reporters and editors are supposed to gather the facts, gather the truth, and report that to their readers. And the fact that they're just tossing this aside at Northwestern because they may harm or offend their readership, it just paints a sad picture for the future of journalism in our country.
Yeah, I mean, David, I'm a Northwestern alumni, and I was...
Me too.
Shocked and disappointed to hear this. I was kind of bewildered by it. And Eduardo, it's so different from when I was at Northwestern. You were excited to be challenged. You were excited for opposing viewpoints. That was kind of the fun of college, of hearing those opposing viewpoints, of being challenged. So was this only in the last 10 years that this has really started, this focus on feelings and this aversion to being offended in any way?
Yeah, unfortunately, we've seen this rise over the past few years. At the Leadership Institute's Campus Reform, we've covered this even in just the last few weeks. So a while back, Harvard University, the student paper there had to apologize to its student base because the students were outraged that the student paper simply requested a comment from ICE. So simply requesting a comment, which is part of journalistic practice, is now something that has to be apologized for. And like you said, we need to remember what journalism is supposed to be. Oftentimes around the world, whether it's covering wars, exposing corruption, journalism is about exposing the truth. And if we can't even get that on college campuses, what are the next generation of student journalists going to do when they get into the real world? It's really a sad day.
I'm worried about journalism. I'm really more worried about the young people coming out of these colleges for being incredibly pusillanimous. I mean, where's their courage? They're harmed by seeing a picture. They're hurt by hearing Jeff Sessions. This is ridiculous. Isn't there anyone on any of these campuses in the administration building who can stand up and say, this is preposterous. We are not going to apologize for having different points of view. I agree with Jonathan. You know, in my college days, we sat around and debated. What do these kids do now? They play video games? Or, I mean, honestly.
Wow, Liz.
I'm sorry. I find this really, horrible.
I think you're overgeneralizing right now, and I know I'm the youngest
person
on this.
Except we hear about this all the time.
Just with what Eduardo was saying, the example of the future of journalism, let's not discount the quality investigative pieces that comes out of a lot of other local, small newspapers, school newspapers across the country.
But what are they being taught, Christina?
We're talking about college campuses.
Yeah,
You cannot have a dissenting voice.
To put my opinion out there, I don't think they should have apologized or anything like that. But I don't think that you can generalize and say that every kid is just going to be playing video games
except
like that.
We hear these stories.
And
you can't wear a sombrero
it's not
at
just
Yale
young
because
people.
you're,
it's older people across the board. Everybody is sensitive now. Everyone is sensitive.
Times have really changed, right? Back when I was a student, I'd be happy to get my face in the student newspaper. That's a badge of honor. I'd be trying to find out everyone.
By any means necessary?
By any means necessary.
Really?
But my question is this, right? What are the faculty members saying to these students?
Yeah, that's what
they're supposed to be upholding the tenets of the First Amendment.
I agree.
That is the question, and it starts with these professors, and we wonder what they're telling our students to make them feel comfortable enough to do this. And look, part of journalism is that you're often going to read stories that make you feel uncomfortable. Your ideas are going to be challenged. You're going to read things that horrify you, and that's part of what the industry is. And so if we're just going to toss things aside that may bother us, we're not going to have freedom of the press. We're not going to have stories that expose deep truths, and the entire industry is not going to be what it looks like today. It's totally different.
And what's I got to say, what's so chilling is that it's not like this was coming from the administration. This was coming from the students.
Well, and Eduardo, what happens when these journalists have to cover war zones or something like that, put themselves in I mean, if graduate school is supposed to prepare you for a profession, these students are being graduated without being very professional, are they?
No, and I don't even think they'd be capable of doing that. They can't even cover a speech by Attorney General Sessions. Forget, crossing the world to cover a war. And what we see is it goes beyond the student newspapers and the student journalists. This happens with any speaker who comes to campus. Students are now encouraged, hey, if you disagree with the speaker, if you want to feel harmed or feel uncomfortable, you can shut them down because, of course, their safety is apparently the most important thing on a campus.
I think that's exactly the point. Again, journalism is one thing. I agree. We're worried about that. But what is the harm to a student in hearing an opposing point of view? The entire premise is completely bonkers. I mean, honestly, I don't understand it, but it's become an incredibly commonplace complaint. And I really think it is time for organizations such as yours and administrations on these colleges and trustees to stand up and say something, because everyone's just letting it happen.
But is it just young people, Liz, just in your opinion? Because we see this across the board with, anybody from TV personalities to athletes to everything like that. Nobody can voice their opinion anymore.
Eduardo, you got about 5 seconds to wrap this up. Go ahead.
Well, as you were saying, it is going beyond the schools. As people get older, as these students graduate, they're turning into, professionals all across the country, and they're continuing to have that sentiment where if they don't like something, if they're offended by something, they can have it shut down.
Well, Eduardo, you seem to have the right attitude, and you're certainly closer to the situation than any of us. We're glad you're there doing the work that you do. Thank you for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me.
Before we head to break, let's see.